Right now, you're at an inflection point in your business. At 100K, you're probably drowning in client work. At 1 million, your team are stepping all over each other. And at 10 million, you're hemorrhaging cash that you can't even see. If you fix these problems in the right places at the right times, you'll solve for what you need to solve for, and you're going to catch this inflection point and ride it to the moon. If you miss this, you're going to plateau and you're going to stay at the same position and wonder why in 6 months' time things haven't changed. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to show you, based on 3 actual clients that I have worked with and over 400 people and companies that I have coached over the past 3 to 4 years, exactly how these issues can be solved, where AI and operations and automation systems can come into play, and how to alleviate these and to identify these for yourself. For those that don't know, I'm Sheni. I help map processes, find bottlenecks, and then alleviate them through systems, automations, skills, and everything under the sun. There's so much more coming out than you would realize that is actually useful for yourself in your business. I apply all of these to solve the problems of my clients. One of 2 things happen. Either they drastically increase revenue or they drastically increase headcount and get out of fulfillment. So let's get into it. All right, the 100K mark. This is where Headspace is the biggest problem. And these are some of the things that you'll kind of realize if this is the problem that you need to solve in order to get to the next level. So oftentimes when you are in this area and in this range, you basically just need enough to help the 1 to 2 general purpose VAs you have do things on your behalf so that you can keep selling. That is essentially the solution. Now, how do you know that you have this Headspace problem? One of the biggest things is that you will find yourself running around in a bunch of different places in a bunch of different ways, not doing the thing that you know you need to do because you're doing everything still. Oftentimes, at this stage, you only have those 1 to 2 VAs, and they are as confused as you at how to do the things that need to be done. Very, very simple solution, and a very simple and easy way to do this. You just need a basic write-up of 1 to 2 SOPs for how things work in the business and a simple Airtable system to organize yourself. That's literally all you need. So I'm going to show you an example of something that can actually do that. So here is a very, very simple example of exactly what I'm talking about here. So you're going to have something which would just look a little bit like this. It's a very, very simple base. Now, this base is something that you can put together yourself. You can, there's a link that I'll put in the description, which will basically show you where you can find some of this stuff as well for yourself to actually use and implement if you're just starting out right now. But there are a few things that you're going to need. You're going to need a place to store all your client information. That's the very first place. That's what this is. So you can see the client name is here, if they're active or not, their email, the contract that was signed, any pending deliverables. And if you do have a member of staff or 2, you would put their assignees or their assignments here. From here, you also have team. There's only going to be 1 or 2 people here, and oftentimes when you click into them, you may or may not need to have them on Slack with you as well. You may just need their email or their preferred communication channel, whatever that would be. And then you'd put some information down about who they are, and then that's about it. And then as far as the deliverables are concerned, the likelihood is what you're doing right now is either all up here, or is so simple that you can just simply draw out a set of tasks that you would then give to people ad hoc in order to complete certain things. So you may be in a situation where you're working with 1 or 2 VAs that you may have gotten from the Philippines or from India, from Bangladesh, you're offshoring in some way, shape or form, and those people need to do certain things. You want them inside of the system working without you saying, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z. Oftentimes you will still need to do that because they're often paid on a per project or a per hour basis, but they'll see the information that will be present inside of this deliverables board, which has got their name on it, and then they'll click on the information and then they'll see what's inside. In this case, in this example, you can just see that there's basic details, there's a deliverable status, there's a set of urgencies, impacts, the size of the task. You're going to need to write some of this stuff up so that it makes sense to the people that need to actually see it. You can write these out inside of Claude. You don't have to do too much in order to get this sorted. But when it comes to actually generating a lot of SOPs, people confuse it so much. And I will at some point just make a very, very simple video about an SOP. All you really need is to understand exactly what the building blocks are of your business. When you understand the building blocks of your business, you'll be able to split those building blocks into more constituent parts. So let's say you have marketing, you have sales, and you have fulfillment. Marketing, you may just have one channel. It may be cold email. Sales is just you do it. You're not even going to think about outsourcing it. So you're not even going to look at this right now. And then fulfillment has, 4 or 5 stages where where there's onboarding, there's an initial setup process, there's a launch process, and then there's like a reporting process. Well, the initial stage, the onboarding stage, may be something that you just hate doing, and it may be something that you've already handed over to somebody in order to get that completed for you. What you would then do is you would write up exactly what needs to be done, step by step, A, B, C, D, E, throughout the onboarding process to confirm that you have everything that you need. And then all you would do is when you go back into this type of system, you would just have these stages be those things. And then anytime there's a new card, the person that you're speaking to or the person that you're working with just gets information based on that card. And then they just work through those steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just a set of sub workflows to complete a specific workflow that will then give you something that you can then use to do the rest of your work. The likelihood is, if you're doing this correctly, this is going to be the thing that's going to be the 80-20, i.e. the 20% of the work that takes up 80% of your time, or the 20% of your work that is 80% of the busy work. If you can get that off of your hands, you can then just spend all of your time on acquisition, which is how you go from 100K to $1 million a year. This is now where the main issue is process. So you have at this point people who are good because you can't afford great. And they're sat in old process right now that evolved as the business grew. The team are following an 8-step process where 7 steps shouldn't exist. So this example of 100K a year is a lot of the people that I was working with when I was doing a lot of coaching, where there are people who were just getting their very first set of business clients, getting their first 2K, 3K a month retainers, and then that would lead them to a point where they have 4 or 5 people. They're managing most of it themselves, but it's still taking them 11 or 12 hours a day in order to get through all of the work. That solves that problem. However, for the $1 million a year person, the likelihood is these people, if they are still working with SMBs, they're charging somewhere around 1.5 to 3, 4, maybe 5K a month. At that point, in order to hit the $1 million a year, or because when I say $1 million a year, this is kind of the 1 to 3, 4, or 5 million a year range. And I have worked with a number of clients I am currently working with a number of clients who are actually at this stage. They will need something that is going to be able to manage 25 clients, 40 clients, 50 clients. What worked with 4 will not work with 40. And this is where the main problem is. So at this point, people are good because you can't afford great. So there's an element of, we need the people who are able to do the tasks actually there doing things in a way that means that I can get the most bang for their buck with the work, so that they're working as efficiently as humanly possible. These are the solutions. You need to map your processes. You need to run through a framework of some sorts to eliminate the dead weight, and then you need to create better systems. So I'm going to show you what that looks like now. Okay, so I've opened up a few tabs, and you'll see from here exactly what process mapping will look like. Now, there are very similar shapes to all of these. Some of them are very, very different, simply because these are actual live process mappings that I've done with actual clients that I've built things for. So you'll be able to see exactly how things have changed over time. This is an older version. This is also a slightly older version. This is more so a newer version. So I'm going to go through this as an example. And what I'll do is I'll basically describe from this look exactly what process mapping actually entails. So the way that it starts is you have an understanding of the departments and the functions. Now, in this case, this was for a travel agency. So these guys are like luxury travel. They help the people in their network book trips, book flights, and plan and design holidays and vacations for families and other high net worth individuals. It's just a way for people to just not have to think about the planning of the trips that they're doing. And it requires a lot of a massive understanding as to what people need, and exactly how the conversation evolves over time. You need to be able to store that information and then use that information in order to make very conscious decisions about the things that you're doing. If someone is paying you a certain amount to buy you a first class aisle seat, you make sure that you have a first class aisle seat available, and or other plan Bs and plan Cs, etc. So that was kind of like the thought process was going into this situation. Now, here's how this works. Businesses can be reduced to their constituent departments, with the main 5 for now being marketing, sales, operations, finance, and HR. So those are the ones that I've actively worked with over time. But again, it can divide up into more and more: IT, legal, compliance, etc. They can also be involved, but these are the main ones. Each department is made up of different functions. For example, operations has onboarding, research, launch, reporting, auditing, Sales can have, pre-call. It can have the sales call in and of itself. It could have customer relationship management. It could have contracting. It could have invoicing. It could have accounts receivables, etc. Now, when you find the functions of each department, you'll find that it falls into a few different categories. Usually I find it's about 5 to 8 different categories this way. From there, you can get an understanding of, once you understand the departments, you also understand the current tech stack. I have a video, which is what the tech stack of 2026 needs to look like, which I'll, if I remember, put it over here. This will describe what I kind of work through, and I'll show you where that will come into play when I get into the rest of this. But I simply just want to know what you use for delivery, what you use for management, and what you use for communication. Communication will be yourself internally and externally with clients. Management will be project management, file management, storage, etc. And then delivery will be the specific tools and SaaS contracts, etc. that you have in order to deliver the service that you're actually doing. For example, email marketing agencies are going to use Klaviyo, they're going to use MailChimp, SendGrid, or whatever it may be in order to send out the emails themselves. Content agencies are going to use Frame in order to manage the files and the storage, etc. They're also going to have YouTube API related stuff. So delivery in their sense would be the social media platforms themselves. Then there's an understanding of the team and the roles. There's an understanding of the schemas. For example, if you're currently using database software like Airtable, I want to know exactly what's currently inside of there so that I know exactly what to work with. And then from there, we outline the system. So this is where we're looking at, and everything starts off with basically the beginning of how things work. There is always a beginning, and then there is always an end. And you can see here that this is the end, and there's a bunch of stuff in the middle, which then takes you to the beginning. All we're doing here is we're saying, okay, the very first thing that somebody does when they reach your business, what happens? What's next? What's next? What's next? You outline every single step, and you outline every single decision. So all of these triangles you will see are decisions that need to be made. For example, if once you ascertain the trip requirements, in this case, there may be a delay, there may be a lag. In this case, some people do drop off because there's a lot of trip requirements that needed to be handled. Are they still there? No. Follow up. Are they still there? No. Follow up. Are they still there? Yes. Okay, we're going to send a recap. Have we confirmed the details? No. Then we need to ascertain the trip requirements again. If they ghost, we need to go through this process again. And then once we've confirmed the details, we then confirm everything has been gathered in the guest profiles, etc. There is one example. There are multiple examples here. There are multiple examples here. And there are a gigantic set of examples here. You can also see that these titles, for example, change management and the fees and invoicing, and some of these, now these did actually change over time a little bit, because they're not exactly the same as this. For example, fees and invoicing evolved a little bit, bookings evolved a little bit, etc. But this is exactly what it means in order to look at all of the processes. Okay, so what happens next? What happens when you've outlined absolutely everything there? Well, the very first thing that you're going to look at is that whilst you're building this out, you're going to find that there are some things which are just like, why do they exist? And that is where the DEAD framework comes in. So this is the DEAD framework. Decide, i.e. decide, make a decision about certain things. Now, the decision process is very easily decided as, or the best way to describe this is through getting to the bottom of why things occur. So it's working from first principles. It's the whole idea of deciding through using things like the 5 whys, which comes from the Toyota production system, hierarchy, and set of thinking. Understanding exactly why certain things exist, questioning the reality that that's currently presented in front of you. If you can decide, okay, why are we doing this specific element of this step, which is 15 steps? Because this is taking us forever to do, and there's a lot of back and forth in this requirement. If there's an end reason that is sufficient for its existence, well, there's going to be a reason for you to also simplify the thing that is being done. It may be that this 15-step process has like 9 or 10 things inside of it that don't actually need to be part of what, it's not really something that people care about. It doesn't contribute to the end result efficiently. It's also just not something that people actively care about or actively drives a lot of the revenue or the result that you're currently trying to deliver for your client. Okay, cool. We're getting rid of it. That's what elimination means. That's what eliminate means. So once you can find out exactly what it is that you want to keep, you keep it. You then look at all of the things that are, the 80/20s, the real pain points. This part takes the most time. This is the reason why I'm still inside of these systems. This is the reason why I'm spending a lot of time doing stuff that I do not like. Once you've gone through and you have found those things, if they do not need to exist, you get rid of them. You simply delete them. You get them out of here, because the things that do not need to exist then do not get automated. Now, there are usually a couple of other steps that you can do before you eliminate. For example, you simplify. There may be some steps that you don't need a lot of things inside. Maybe there are certain elements of where you're actively working. Maybe your own project management system in and of itself may have just a lot of clutter there. It may have examples of things that used to occur but no longer occurs. That's where simplify comes into play. That is bucketed inside of this idea of elimination. You just want to cut. The more that you cut, the better things get. And oftentimes, if you err on the side of, I'm actually afraid of cutting this, I don't know if this needs to go, get rid of it, because you can always add it back. You can always add it back. Once you've gotten through that, you now have an understanding of what to automate. And this is where creating better systems comes into play. There are tons of videos on my profile right now, which you can see, which will show you exactly how to build out different automations, build out different skills, and build out different infrastructures that will enable your business to work way more efficiently. But now that you've gotten rid of certain elements of the business that do not need to exist, everything that is left that can be automated is now just the stuff that you don't have to think about. So now this is kind of how it ends up looking. You start off with a process that has 50 steps in it. You then reduce the size of the steps by removing all of the unnecessary steps. You then have only 20 steps left after you've done the things that can be automated, i.e. we're just drawing Zapier and Make and NAN workflows that don't have any AI involved to get rid of certain things. After AI automation and the generation of agentic workflows and building things inside of Claude Cowork, building out routines, building out scheduled cron runs on developed, modal, deployed, webhooked skills that you have inside of your Claude code, you would then have, instead of 20 steps, 12 steps. And then the custom agents will then take that all the way down to 5. And then those 5 go through the delegation process. This is literally how you get rid of almost all of the work that enables your team to do certain things to a point where now your service has become a product. This is what becoming AI native actually looks like. And for people who are in the 1, 2, 3, 5 million a year range that I've actively worked with, the people that I can see who are chipping away at all of the items inside of their business that are creating the inefficiencies, creating extra admin, giving the founder more and more things to worry about, creating fires that mean that other people need to be involved, that take Headspace away from growth and acquisition and actually finding key members who can just be department heads and leaders. Those things tend to be what will keep them behind if they don't have. But once they start working on them, they can move past these points and then get to a stage where the only thing that we are working on is the stuff that people who are in this range deal with. So the people at 10 million a year have inefficiency problems. And these are hundreds of tiny problems that affect other parts of the business. So I want to tell 2 stories from 2 clients that I have worked with, and both of them are very, very avoidable if somebody is working and watching what's happening. But a lot of the times they just fall by the wayside. So the first one was a coaching program. This coaching program has a ton of payment links on their Stripe. So they have a whole sales team. This sales team is ripping. They get a bunch of sales calls every single day. They're spending tens of thousands a day on ads, etc. And the problem that would occur is that all of the people who were doing operations on the back end, i.e. the CSMs, etc., who are actually managing the students that are coming through this program, are dealing with the fact that every single person that has done something inside of the sales process have created a new payment link on different products inside of Stripe. So Stripe is just an absolute mess. There are different payment schedules, there are different products, there are different items with different names. They're all linked to different things. And because all of the automations are linked to different workflows that are being done on the back end inside of Make and NAN and Zapier for the things that are actually working with this business, in this case, it was like Zapier and Make.com, something just wouldn't run. And it's like, okay, why is this not happening? What's going on here? Why are we running into situations where there are people that are getting charged for the first month of the program, but month number 2 when he comes in 9 weeks later? Well, it's because one of those payment links was attached to a product that didn't have a subscription. So it was just a price for something that wasn't recurring. So now we're losing money there. That was one situation. And then the second situation was for another coaching program where there were so many failed payments and accounts receivables and nobody knew who needed to follow up that salespeople and CSMs just had beef. There was just nothing going on. There was just nothing there to solidify how everything was meant to work, which meant that there was just a ton of inefficiency, and all of the revenue that could have been put in place, all of the stuff that could have been done through, 1 or 2 members of an accounting team that didn't exist, just didn't end up occurring. So all of these problems are really dumb problems, but they can creep in when headcount gets there. When headcount gets to the 35, 40, 50 plus range, and you start to reach this 10 million a year size where you're making, 2, 3, 4 million a month, that's where a lot of these problems can start to surface. They're all a little bit pernickety. For the most part, the sales systems, all of the larger systems aren't broken. And by broken, I mean the bottleneck. At this point, the bottleneck it consists of a bunch of basically 1,000 cuts. It's just death by 1,000 paper cuts. So what is the actual solution here? Bringing on a partner who can look at the full picture and then build solutions across departments, because you need a multidisciplinary look in order to solve the problems at hand. So an example of something that I have done and something that I'm currently doing with a business right now is I'm taking a look at absolutely everything. And whilst I'm predominantly working in the operations side of things and working in the fulfillment side of things, I'm looking at how sales are occurring. I'm looking at where all the information from the funnels are occurring. I'm looking at the fact that there's no visualization, there's no dashboards in place. All of the people who are looking at the main numbers, who don't have time to be in the weeds, they don't have any numbers to go off of. They're flying completely blind. That's the first thing. Second thing is there's brand development that needs to occur, but there's no system in place for content management that is either in-house or managed by agencies. Another side of this, there are a number of things that are happening when it comes to contracting, etc., where there's only, and this is more so another client that I work with as opposed to the one I'm dealing with now, but both have this very, very similar problem. The onboarding and contracting is completely separate. So a contract doesn't go out when a payment goes out, but somebody is given a task to do things manually. Loads of small things like that can start to compound, because what will end up happening is that, and this is the reason why I say multidisciplinary, one element belongs to sales, because the people who deal with sales aren't looking at the fulfillment side of things. That the moment that a prospect becomes a client, one party just stops looking and starts paying attention to another party. That can start to create problems where there is some need for a crossover, especially of information. So really what you need in these cases, and this is the role that I am playing, is I am becoming a partner who can look at how sales is going, how marketing is going, what the business needs on the fulfillment side, what the business needs from a HR side, looking at all of the things that are being done right now that just look stupid. It's like, why are you doing this stuff? What's going on here? I can look at all of those things and I can project out 3 months later, 6 months later, knowing exactly what this is going to occur, knowing how this is going to become an actual problem that then needs to be solved, but is actually hindering your growth at this current point in time. So having a look at that and then essentially going through a very small or consistent or even longer process of process mapping, and then making small changes where you can just say, all right, this is now the thing that needs to be done. This is the thing that we need to eliminate. This is the thing we need to automate. This is the thing that doesn't belong to you anymore. It needs to belong to somebody else, because this person is wearing 8 or 9 hats. And a lot of things are going through them, because what ends up happening is the founder's no longer the bottleneck. It's just the person who's either been there the longest, or a specific person whose job role is titled X, but the role that they're playing is A, B, C, E, G, H, and J. And those people tend to have too many things going on their plate, and they then need to remove themselves from certain elements of the business so that they are not the bottleneck, they are not what's clogging up everything. So that's kind of how it works on that front, but the process is still the same. There's always going to be some level of decisions that need to be made, some level of elimination, some level of automation, and some level of delegation. So to round off this amazing set of issues that once solved will make everything easier for the person who is at this level. At 100k a year, the biggest problem is Headspace. You need enough to help the 1 to 2 general purpose VAs that you have do things on your behalf so that you can just keep selling. Your whole job is just bring money in. And for that, a basic write-up of 1 to 2 SOPs for how things work that you want to get rid of, that you want to give to them because they are 80-20 issues that you know you want to take off of your plate. And a simple Airtable to organize yourself is all you need to get there. That's literally it. Then $1 million a year. At this point, you have people who are good because you can't afford great. And they're sat in old processes that evolved as the business grew. And the team are following an 8-step process where 7 steps shouldn't exist. At that point, you want to do process mapping. You then want to go through the dead framework where you can decide certain things to eliminate. You eliminate them, you automate what's left, and then you delegate on top of that. And then you create better systems by the implementation of a number of different things that can then make things easier for you, depending on how things are running right now. Then at 10 million a year and above, it's inefficiencies, it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. The solution here is bringing on somebody who can look at the full picture and then build solutions across departments. This is where you need somebody to be the multidisciplinary operator to come in and just look at where there are problems and just solve them across the board. Now, this person tends to be either one person who is amazing or a number of different people who are both in the business and vendors. Those vendors tend to be the automation specialists who are just kind of like, hey, come in and build this, hey, come in and do this. And then the internal team will come in and make those decisions, make those design conversations happen, and then find out what actually needs to be deleted. If you are somebody in any of these groups, most likely the 1 to 10 mil group, simply because those are the people who are having this specific problem where they need somebody to come in and have a look at how things are designed. Click the link in the description, click the link in the first comment, have a conversation with me. We can get that one sorted, and then we can have a look at how the business runs. What I like to do is I like to find out what's happening by mapping out all of the business's processes. So have a look at those. If you're looking for a way to actually map those processes yourself, because a lot of what I've spoken about right now can be solved by finding out what's going on in the business, there'll be a video there which is going to show you exactly what this process looks like and how to actually do this for yourself. So I've been Sheni, and I'll see you on the next one.